Hey guys. Look, sorry, here's somebody at my door. Hey, Great Dane. Hey, cool gamer. Hey, Mama. Hey, Brenda Paws. What? Leland? Leland? It's you? Phew. Okay, yeah, it was my son that scared me. I thought someone was trying to break in the damn door. Hey, Kimmy. Hey, Sarah. Well, I did.
Jack literally just ran right in front of me and he went like this. He's like,
Aw, he misses you. Now he's running to the front door. Good going. You made him go nuts.
"Sorry, I talked to your friend.
My what?
I talked to
My friend.
your
My Frank.
Yeah.
What's my Frank? Oh, okay. Go. I gotta go. I'll catch up with you in a bit. All right, so I'm just gonna get into this. Right now, we're on chapter 3. So this is August 31st, 1888, and this one is the murder of Mary Ann Nichols. So now we're on murder number 3. What was the first one? There was Martha Tabram. Was that the first one? Hold on. No. Yeah, there's Emma Smith, Martha Tabram. Okay, yeah, we are on number 3. So number 3 is Mary Ann Nichols. She was one of the more popular ones that I remember the name from anyways, from movies and just reading books and stuff. So it says the murder of Mary Ann Nichols occurred in the early hours of Friday, 31st August, 1888. Whether or not either of the two previous murders have been committed by the same hand, which is unlikely, both police and press linked the killing with the previous two, and the idea that a maniac was abroad killing prostitutes was born. The police inquiries also revealed the suspect called Leather Apron, who was quickly made prominent by the sensational press. The reports concerning this murder are enclosed in a file cover as follows. So this is for the J Division. It says to the Assistant Commissioner, Criminal Investigation Department, summary of contents. Special Weekly Report RE Murder of Mary Ann Nichols at Bucks Row. Third Special Report submitted in accordance with PO 9th of February, 1888. The deceased has been identified as Mary Ann Nichols, a prostitute, who separated from her husband about 9 years ago, and has been since 1882 at different periods inmate of Edmonton, the City of London, Holborn, and Lambeth workhouses. No information to point to the offender can be obtained. A man named Pizer, alias Leather Apron, has been in the habit of ill-using prostitutes in various parts of the metropolis for some time past, and careful inquiries have been made to trace him, but without success. There's no evidence against him at present. Inquiries are being continued. So the way this book reads, it's actual transcripts and reports from the 1800s. So excuse me and forgive me if I stumble on my words or I try and make sense of it, because a lot of it, uh, the way they talk, I think is funny. It's just kind of a pain in the butt when I don't really understand what they're saying. So, okay, so two ACC, CID, ACB. A report dated 31st August 1888 by Inspector John Spratling is the first official summary of the murder of Mary Ann Nichols in Bucks Row, Whitechapel. I don't even know what parentheses, I think they're trying to say, indicate portions of document missing. The cover reads, CO reference divisional reference, submitted through executive J division. Subject report RE murder of a woman unknown at Bucks Row, Whitechapel, 31st. First special report submitted in accordance with PO 9th February 1888 to a constable. So Metropolitan Police J Division on August 31st, 1888. I did have a good weekend. It was very it was lazy actually, which I don't mind at all. I got my cleaning done and watched quite a few movies. Neil reports at 3:45 on 31st, he found the dead body of a woman lying on her back with her clothes a little above her knees, with her throat cut from ear to ear on a yard crossing at Bucks Row, Whitechapel. That just screams to me Black Dahlia, because we just read that book, right? Her throat cut from ear to ear. Neil obtained the assistance of PCs Smyson, Thane, the latter called Dr. Llewellyn, number 152 Whitechapel Road. He arrived quickly and pronounced life to be extinct. Apparently, but a few minutes, he directed her removed to the mortuary, stating he would make a further examination there, which was done on the ambulance. I mean, I kind of get what they're saying. It's just so over the place. I mean, I understand it. Oh, how they spell February is Febry. So she was extinct for only a few minutes, and this guy directed her to the mortuary, stating he would make a further examination there, which was done on the ambulance. Okay. Upon my arrival there and taking a description, I found that she had been disemboweled and at once sent to inform the doctor of it. Uh, I arrived quickly and on further examination stated that her throat had been cut from left to right, two cuts being on the left side, the windpipe, gullet, and spinal cord being cut through, a, br- a bruise apparently of a thumb being on right lower jaw, also one on the left cheek, the abdomen had been cut open from center of bottom of ribs, long right side, under pelvis to the left of the stomach. There the wound was jagged. The omentum, or coating of the stomach, was also cut in several places, and two small stabs on private parts, apparently done with a strong bladed knife, supposed to have been done by some left-handed person, death being almost instantaneous. Description: about age about 45, length 5'2" or 3, dark hair, dark brown turning gray, eyes are brown, bruise on lower right jaw and left cheek, slight laceration of the tongue, one tooth deficient front of upper jaw, two on the left of the lower due, dress brown ulster, 7 large brass buttons, figure of a female riding a horse and a man at the side thereon. Huh? Figure of a female riding a horse and a man at the side thereon. I don't even know what that means. Brown linsey, which was a frock, gray woolen petticoat, flannel due, white chest flannel, brown stays, white chemise, black ribbed woolen stockings, man's boots, cut on uppers, tips on heels, black straw bonnet, trimmed black velvet. Hey, Dragon. Yeah, you see what I mean, Brenda Pause, how it's kind of all over the place. Not all over, it's just hard to understand. I made inquiries and was informed by Miss Emma Green, a widow, New Cottage adjoining, and Mr. Walter Purkis, Essex Wharf, opposite, also of William Court, night watchman to Messrs. Brown and Eagle Bucks Row and PC 81 GER police on duty at the wharf near, none of whom heard any scream during the night or anything to lead them to believe that the murder had been committed there. The stations and premises of the East London and District Railways, all the wharves and enclosures in the vicinity have been searched, but no trace of any weapon could be found there. PC states he passed through Bucks Row at 3:15 a.m. Wasn't that the time of the last murder? I remember 3:15. What's 3:15 about? I swear I do. That one's 11 o'clock. Like found it 3:15. Where is it? I know I remember reading that. It's gonna bug me now because I can't find it. At 2 a.m. Yeah, 3:30 a.m. 3:15, 3:30. Okay. Hey Deb. No, don't worry about it. I just started. I guess telling others, just bear with me. The way they write, the constables, the doctors, inspectors, police officers, there's so many different interpretations, I guess, of what happened to these women, and a lot of it's hard to make sense of, so I'm gonna try my damnedest. So the stations and premises of the East London and District Railways, all the wharves and enclosures in the vicinity, have been searched, but no trace of any weapon could be found there. The PC states he passed through Bucks Row at 3:15 a.m. and Kirby at the same time, but the woman was not there then and is not known to them. And this was by Spratling Inspector and J. Keating Superintendent. Think that's what it's supposed to mean. I could be wrong though. Yes, of course. Come here, Claire. You're a screen pig. You know that? Yeah, you're a hog. It has since been ascertained that the dress bears the marks of Lambeth Workhouse, and deceased is supposed to have been an inmate of that house. And this was from J. Keating. A further report dated 7th September 1888 by Inspector Joseph Henry Helson, local inspector, the Bethnal Green Division, casts more light on the murder. Yeah, so there's so many different reports here. This is the Metropolitan Police, the J Division. This is the 7th day of September, 1888. So the subject is murder of Marianne Nichols at Whitechapel, reference to the papers, special report. With reference to the subject in the margin, I beg to report that the marks on the clothing led to the identification of the deceased as a woman who had been an intimate of Lambeth Workhouse on several occasions, and that her name was Marianne Nichols. It was afterward ascertained that her husband, William Nichols, was at present residing at 37 Coburg Row, Old Kent Road, and employed as a machine printer by Messrs. Perkis Bacon and Co., Whitefriars, St. E.C. They separated about 9 years since in consequence of her drunken habits. A lot of these women, well, all of these women were prostitutes, and all of them were drunks. And they have all separated, all the husbands have left them. They're literally all the same women, the same everything. For some time, he allowed her $5 per week, but in 1882, I don't think it was $5, I think it was 5 cents per week. But in 1882, it having come to his knowledge that she was living the life of a prostitute, he discontinued the allowance. This happened to the other woman too. In consequence of life of a prostitute, in consequence of this, she became chargeable to the guardians of the parish of Lambeth, by whom the husband was summoned to show cause why he should not be ordered to contribute towards her support, and on these facts being proved, the summons was dismissed. They had not spoken to each other since, and the husband has not heard anything of her since. There are no grounds for suspecting him to be the guilty party. Since 1882, she has at different periods been an inmate of Edmonton, the City of London, Holborn, and Lambeth workhouses. She left the latter institution on the 12th of May last to take a situation at Ingleside Rose Hill Road, Wandsworth, and absconded from there on the 12th of July, stealing clothing to the value of $3.10. A few days after this, she obtained lodgings at 18 Thrall, St. Spitalfields, a common lodging house, and remained there and a similar house at 55 Flower and Dean Street close by until the day before she was found dead. A further examination of the body and clothing and the result of the post-mortem examination leaves no doubt but that the murder was committed where the body was found. Carefully search was continued with a view to find any weapon that was used by the murderer or murderer or murderers. In all probability, there was only one, but nothing has been found. Inquiries have also been made from the persons who reside in the locality, watchmen who were employed in adjoining premises, PCs on the adjoining beats, and in every quarter from which it was thought any useful information might be obtained, but at present not an atom of evidence can be obtained to connect any person with the crime. So the PCs, they're the police that are on the beat. They literally just, I don't know, I think they have a block each to take care of. And whenever there's a crime or like a break-in, any crimes of that matter, they blow their whistle and that's how they would communicate. They would all come running from blocks away. She was seen walking the Whitechapel Road about 11 p.m. on the 30th at 12:30 a.m. 31st. What? At about 11 p.m. on the 30th, and then it says at 12, maybe that's just, oh, at 12:30 a.m. 31st, she was seen to leave the Frying Pan Public House, Brick Lane, Spitalfields at 1:20 a.m. 31st. She was at the common lodging, 18 Thrall Street, and at 2:30 a.m. at the corner of Osborne Street and Whitechapel Road. On each occasion, she was alone. At 3:45 a.m. or an hour and a quarter later, she is found dead, and no person can be found at present who saw her after 2:30 a.m. This there's different homes and as well in Brick Lane, Spitalfield. So that right there, that's twice now these women um have met their end there at these wee hours in the morning. The inquiry has revealed that the fact that a man named Jack Pizer, alias Leather Apron, has for some considerable period been in the habit of ill-using prostitutes in this and other parts of the metropolitan and careful search has been and is continued to be made to find this man in order that his movements may be accounted for on the night in question, although at present there is no evidence whatsoever against him. The inquiry is being carefully continued by Inspector Aberline from CO and myself, and every effort used to obtain information that may lead to arrest of the murderer. This is from J.H. Helson, Inspector, and J. Keating, Superintendent. That's crazy. Jack Pizer. Jack the Ripper. Jack Pizer. His alias is Leather Apron. Skin. Wow. I love reading all these old reports that are actually true. I really do like reading these. I don't know, who knows? Maybe we'll be able to find it. Can you imagine? On channel Nikki 38, her and her wonderful subs, they slam dunked it. They found her killer. Oh, I love stuffed peppers. Do you make yours with rice? Oh, they're so good. And cheese. I actually made mine with quinoa and cheese and a bunch of spices, and I can't remember what else. As early as the end of August, a letter was received at the Home Office from the public sector to do with concern about the murders. It was thought that the offer of a reward might lead to the detection of the criminal or criminals. The file cover concerning this matter is dated 31st August 1888. You love it too, Great Dane? Like these books? I don't know. I love history, especially unsolved history. Ooh, rice, beef, and cheese. That sounds great. Stamped. Home Office, 1st September 88, department number, blah, blah, blah. And then it says August 31st, 1888, Messer L.P. Walter and Son. References forward newspaper extract respecting the recent murders in Whitechapel and recommends that a reward be offered for the detection of the murderer. Not pressing, then there's a line, and then it says minutes in all caps. Ooh, blueberry muffins. Yeah, like even the author is trying to figure out some of these words that are in here. They don't quite understand. Like there's a question mark and it says ACK. Then there's a blank and it says, and that the practice of offering rewards for the discovery of criminals has for some time been discontinued. And that so far as the circumstances of the present case have at present been investigated, do not disclose any special ground for they meant departure from the usual custom. This was 3rd September 88, wrote Messrs. Walter and Son on the 4th of 1888. The letter sent by Messrs. Walter and Son, dated 31st August 1888, is enclosed. Telegraphic address, Wintering, London. Telephone, Alan P. Walter and Son. And then it was stamped Home Office, September 88 on the 1st. Manufacturers of Church Street, clothing for Spitalfields, exportation, London, 31st August 1888. The Secretary of State for the Home Department. We beg to enclose your report of this fearful murder, and to say that such is the state of affairs in this district that we are put to the necessity of having a night watchman to protect our premises. The only way, in our humble opinion, to tackle this matter is to offer at once a reward. Yours very obediently, Alan P. Walter and Son. I looked on Amazon for this one, unfortunately it's not available in a Kindle format. Oh, for the book I have? I got this book years ago. I think I got it at Chapters. It was about $25. It was pretty, and that was a long time ago. Um, I'm just thinking. There's got to be a site. I'll look for you, Great Dane Mom. I'll get it for you. I'll find it for you, at least. It's too old. Nah, you know what? Check eBay, Etsy, you name it, anything like that. Guarantee they'll have it. Okay, this one, it says the letter is followed by cutting from the newspaper. Okay, so this is from the newspaper now. The missing August 31st, 1888. Horrible murder in Whitechapel. The Central News says scarcely has the horror and sensation caused by the discovery of the murdered woman in Whitechapel some short time ago had time to abate, then another discovery is made, which for the brutality exercised on the victim is even more shocking and will no doubt create as great a sensation in the vicinity as its predecessor. Oh, they do have it? Oh, you wanted it for Kindle. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I see. You know what? I don't know. I was just I'm more of a book person. I like having it. I like the smell, I like having it in my hands. I like looking at the actual documents. I don't know. That's just me though. Hopefully it's not too much because it is older. The affair, up to the present, is enveloped in complete mystery. and the police have, as yet, no evidence to trace the perpetrators of the horrible deed. The facts are that a constable, John Neal, was walking down Bucks Row, Thomas Street, Whitechapel, about 3:45 this morning. He discovered a woman between 35 and 40 years of age lying at the side of the street with her throat cut right open from ear to ear, the instrument with which the deed was done, tracing the throat from left to right. I don't know, it's just one of those books. It's big. It's not okay, so it's not on Amazon. Not no Kindle, but it is on Amazon.
Oh my.
Oh, it's not expensive? Good. Oh, really, Dragon? That sounds interesting. So the instrument with which the deed was done, tracing the throat from left to right. The wound was about 2 inches wide, and blood was flowing profusely. In fact, she was discovered to be lying in a pool of blood. She was immediately conveyed to the Whitechapel mortuary, where it was found that, besides the wound in the throat, the lower part of her person was completely ripped open. I'm assuming that means her private part. Wow. The wound extends nearly to her breast and must have been affected with a large knife. As the corpse of the woman lies in the mortuary, it presents a ghastly sight. The victim measures 5 foot 2 inches in height. The hands are bruised and bear evidence of having engaged in a severe struggle. There's the impression of a ring having been worn on one of the deceased's fingers, but there's nothing to show that it had been wrenched from her in a struggle. Some of the front teeth have also been knocked out, and the face is bruised on both cheeks and very much discolored. The deceased wore a rough brown ulster with large buttons in front. Her clothes are torn and cut up in several places, leaving evidence of the ferocity with which the murder was committed. The only way by which the police can prosecute an inquiry at present is by finding someone who can identify the deceased and then, if possible, trace those in whose company she was last seen. In Bucks Row, naturally, the greatest excitement prevails, and several persons in the neighborhood state that an affray occurred shortly after midnight. But no screams were heard, nor anything beyond what might have been considered evidence of an ordinary brawl. The woman has not yet been identified. She was wearing workhouse clothes and it is supposed she came from Lambeth. A night watchman was in the street where the crime was committed. He heard no scream and saw no signs of a scuffle. The body was quite warm when brought to the mortuary at 4:30 this morning. That's crazy they didn't hear anything. Oh, that's awesome, Deb. I squealed. No, this was the I'm trying to okay, so the Tabram and those are not in there's no photographs of those women, the first two, um at all. There is what starts with Marianne Nichols. Oh wait, there is. Martha is in here. Okay, Martha Tabram. Yeah, the other one didn't have a picture. Emma Smith. So Emma Smith was the first, and then Martha Tabram. There is a photo of her, and then the next one is Marianne Nichols, and they've got all the photos in here. I will put them on my community tab. That is a wonderful find. That's awesome. So the latest particulars. Immediately on the affair being reported at the Bethel Green Police Station, two inspectors proceeded to the mortuary and examined the clothes in the hope of being able to discover something likely to lead to her identification. In this, they were not successful, as the only articles found on the body were a broken comb and a piece of looking glass. The wounds, of which there are 5, could only have been committed by a dagger or a long, sharp knife. The officers engaged in the case are pushing their inquiries to the neighborhood as to the doings of certain gangs known to frequent these parts, and an opinion is gaining ground amongst them that the murderers are the same who committed the 2 previous murders near the same spot. It is believed that these gangs, who make their appearance during the early hours of the morning, are in the habit of blackmailing these poor creatures, and where their demands are refused, violence follows. Up till noon, Mr. Win E. Baxter, the coroner for the district, had not received any official intim- in intimation of the occurrence, but the inquest will most likely be held on Monday morning. The letter of reply to Messrs. Walter and Son, dated 4th September 1888, from the Home Office is as follows. Okay, so that was all written by the newspaper, apparently. So this was dated, so this is to Whitehall. This was dated 4th September 1888. Gentlemen, in reply to your letter of the 31st, ultimo expressing the opinion that a reward should be offered for the detection of the Whitechapel murderer, I am directed by the Secretary of State to inform you that the practice of offering rewards for the discovery of criminal has for some time been discontinued, and that so far as the circumstances of the present case have at present been investigated, they do not, in his opinion, disclose any special ground for departure from the usual custom. I am, gentlemen, your obedient servant, E. Lee Pemberton. I am, comma, gentlemen, comma, your obedient servant. Hey, Teresa. Okay, so I think that means they're not gonna like have a reward with money at all. Whew. Okay, a detailed summary report dated 19th October 1888 related to the murder of Nichols, submitted by Chief Inspector Donald S. Swanson, Criminal Investigation Department, Scotland Yard, reads. Metropolitan Police, Criminal Investigation Department, comma, Scotland Yard, 19th day of October, 1880. Right, Dragon? It's funny, but some of it's hard to understand, so you have to kind of reread it, and then I can try, like, even like I said, the author's got question marks, and it's got different things written on the side. Hey, Joe Bean Joe. Okay, so this is, I believe, to the Metropolitan Police Criminal Investigation Department, Scotland Yard. The subject is Bucks Row, the murder of Marianne Nichols. I beg to report, like that too, like I beg to report. I don't know, it's just weird. I beg to report that the following are the particulars relating to the murder of Marianne Nichols in possession of police. 3:45 a.m., 31st August. The body of a woman was found lying on the footway in Bucks Row, Whitechapel by Charles Cross and Robert Paul Carman on their way to work. They informed PC 55H Division, Mizzen in Baker's Row, but before his arrival, PC 97 Neal, on whose beat it was, had discovered it. Dr. Llewellyn of 152 Whitechapel Road was sent for. He pronounced life extinct, and he describes the wounds as throat cut nearly severing head from body, abdomen cut open from center of bottom of ribs along right side, under pelvis to left of stomach. There the wound was jagged. The coating of the stomach was cut in several places, and 2 small stabs on private parts, which, in his opinion, may have been done with a strong bladed knife. At first, the doctor was of opinion that the wounds were caused by a left-handed person, but he is now doubtful. 31st August 88. The body was identified by Ellen Holland of 18 Thurl Street East as that of Mary Ann Nichols, of the same address, common lodging house. Subsequently, by the husband, William Nichols of 37 Coburg Road, Old Kent Road, and he was a printer's machinist. There was no money in pocket of deceased, and there was nothing left behind by the murderer. The results of police inquiries are as follows. 2:30 a.m., 31st August, 88. Miss Nichols was last seen alive at 2:30 a.m., 31st of August, 1888, in a state of drunkenness at the corner of Osborne Street and Whitechapel Road, by Ellen Holland mentioned above. She was then alone and going in the direction of Bucks Row. by Whitechapel Road. They have this underlined like a lot. I'm not sure why, but they do. Hey, Two Skulls. Yes, that's what I was thinking too. Seeing how American Horror Story, they're always doing something, right? That's true stories on everything. And yeah, Jack the Ripper would be amazing. Because they did H.H. Holmes has to do Jack the Ripper. An hour and a quarter afterward, the body was found at Bucks Row. Maybe that's why they underlined it. It says she was seen alone and going in the direction of Bucks Row by Whitechapel Road, and an hour and a quarter afterwards, the body was found at Bucks Row. I don't know why they have that underlined. Must be something. Inquiry was then made at common lodging houses, and the statements of person taken, but no person was able to say that they have seen her alive more recently than Ellen Holland. The police were unable to learn from any source that any person was seen with her or with a person supposed to be her after that hour. Coffee stall keepers, prostitutes, the night watchman in Winthorpe Street, a street parallel to Bucks Row, as well as the inhabitants of Bucks Row, were questioned, but they were unable to help the police in the slightest degree. They had not seen the woman, nor had they heard any screams or noise. Inquiry at the common lodging house where Miss Nichols lived shewed that when she left there at 1:40 a.m., it was for the purpose of getting sufficient money to pay for her bed. This is underlined too. 4D, like 4 days? So it was to pay for her bed that she had then no money, and she told Ellen Holland at 2:30 a.m. that then she had no money to pay for her bed. Robbery could not therefore be the motive for the murder because she okay, so she was left there at 1:40 a.m. and it was for the purpose of getting sufficient money to pay for her bed. That she had then no money, and she told Ellen that at 2:30 a.m. that then she had no money to pay for the bed. So she was looking for money to pay for her bed by prostituting, I'm assuming. So robbery could not therefore be the motive for the murder. Inquiry was made into her history, which turns out to be as follows. The deceased, through her intemperate habits, separated from her husband about 9 years ago, and he allowed her uh, 5 cents per week till 1882, when it came to his knowledge that she was leading an immoral life and he stopped the allowance. She became chargeable to the parish of Lambeth, and the husband was summoned to shew because why he should not contribute towards her support, but the summons was dismissed. Since that time, the husband has not heard anything of her. An inquiry revealed that she had been leading an irregular life, sleeping at a common lodging houses and workhouses for a considerable time previous to her death. The inquiry into her history did not disclose the slightest pretext for a motive on the part of her friends or associates in the common lodging houses. Yeah, it is, Joe. Am I pronouncing it right or wrong? Probably wrong. Shewed. Yeah, I said shrewd, but it was like shewed. I think that's what they're trying to say, but it's spelled like that, yeah. A lot of these words are not spelled how we spell them now, but I can kind of get the gist of it of what they're trying to say. At least I think I do. The absence of the motives which led to violence and of any scrap of evidence, either direct or circumstantial, left the police without the slightest shadow of trace. Consequently, inquiries were made into the history of and accounts given of themselves of persons respecting whose character and surroundings suspicion was cast in statements made to police. You're like, that's a mouthful. It means showed. Thank you. I need to write that down. Awesome. Thank you so much. So it's not shooed, like shooed out the door. They were showed out the damn door. Great. Now I gotta figure out where the heck that word was. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. Thanks, that makes more sense. I mean, they were shooing and showed. Well, no, they weren't there shooing, but at least okay. I got it. Thank you for that. If there's anything else you think I'm not getting right, let me know because I don't understand this talk, a lot of it. Among such are the three slaughtermen named Tompkins, Britton, and Mumford, employed by night at Messrs. Harrison, Barber, and Coy, premises Winthorpe Street. Their statements were each other. No, their statements were taken separately and without any means of communicating with each other, and they satisfactorily accounted for their time, being corroborated in some portions by the police on night duty near the premises. Another man named John Pizer, better known as Leather Apron. I thought it was Jack. What? So there's a Jack and a John Pizer? No, you're not weird. No, thank you for that. I need to know the right pronunciation. Okay, so they said there was a Jock Pizer and they called him Leather Apron, and now they're saying John Pizer, known as Leather Apron. So can Jack and John be like the same name back then? So he became suspected on account of his alleged levying blackmail on prostitutes and assaulting them if they did not comply with his request, as detailed to police by women in the common lodging houses. So that to me right there sounds like yes. Okay, so John and Jack. Okay, thank you. Thanks, guys. So this to me sounds like they got their killer. Jack Pizer, Leather Apron. You know what I'm saying? I'm assuming they've already looked all into this, and apparently it wasn't, but I don't know. I guess we'll find out the more I read on. So he was blackmailing prostitutes and assaulting them if they did not comply with his request, a detailed as detailed to police by a woman in the common lodging houses. On 10th of September, he was found and his statement taken to the effect that on August 31st, he had slept at a common lodging uh I don't know what the hell that means. Home maybe? At Holloway Road, which was fully corroborated, and the date fixed by the proprietor who knows Pizer. On 8th September, he stayed at 22 Mulberry Street. In this, he was corroborated by several persons, for the police ascertained that, in consequence of suspicions published about him by the press, he was in reality afraid to come out. Oh my gosh, I think we're on a new one already. The case of Annie Chapman took place on 8th of September, and both inquiries merged into one. The particulars of further inquiries will be found in report of the murder of Annie Chapman by Donald F. Swanson, Chief Inspector. A police descriptive form relating to Marianne Nichols is also included, giving her details as follows. So we already know the details, but I'm going to read it anyway. So her age was 45. Her profession or her calling was a prostitute. Her hair was dark and turning gray. Eyes are brown. Face is discoloration of face. Complexion is dark. Marks or particularities. On person, a piece of looking glass, a comb, and a white handkerchief. Her dress was a brown ulster, 7 large buttons, horse and man standing by side thereon. I have no clue what that means, unless they literally mean a horse and a man were standing. What? It says on her dress though. It's so weird. Brown ulster, 7 large buttons, horse and man standing by the side thereon, linsey frock, brown stays, blue ribbed woolen stockings, straw bonnet. Note: she was the wife of W.M. Nichols of 37 Coburg Road, Old Kent Road. He was a printer's machinist. These reports are the first official papers on the murder of Mary Ann Nichols, further information being contained in some later documents in the contemporary newspaper articles, which also include lengthy reports of the inquest and evidence of the witnesses. There's an index to the papers on the Nichols murder in the Home Office files. So this apparently is a copy. It's stamped Home Office, 25th October, 1888. Bucks Row, the murder of Mary Ann Nichols. In Scent of a Woman, Al Pacino ordered to John Daniels. The bartender said, "You mean Jack?" Al Pacino replied, "I know him so well, I call him John." I didn't know that. John and Jack are, can be used as the same. I did not know that. But that's like I never understood Richard and Dick. I never understood that. So they got subject and the page and the remarks. All right, so it says hour and date of murder, page 1. Wounds on body, 1 and 2, described by Dr. Llewellyn as Mary Ann Nichols, prostitute. Body identified, history of deceased, inquiries by police, at Common Lodge, coffee stall keepers, I don't know, prostitutes, night watchmen in Winthorpe Street, nearly parallel to Bucks Row, employed by Messrs. Harrison and Barber. Slaughterman, John Pizer, alias Leather Apron. So it's just a bunch of stuff written down. I'm assuming by inspectors, it looks like here. As the official inquest papers on Mary Ann Nichols have not been found, it is necessary to read the contemporary newspaper reports that are included in the Home Office official papers held at the Public Record Office. In the case of Nichols, they are extracted from the Times, the first being 3 September 1888 on page 12 of this newspaper. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be called a dick either. But then again, there you go. Great Dane mom just said, yeah, most Richards are dicks. The Whitechapel murder. Up to a late hour last evening, the police had obtained no clue to the perpetrator of the latest. Oh, just the way they talk. Too late hour last evening, the police had obtained no clue to the perpetrator of the latest of the 3 murders, which have so recently taken place in Whitechapel. And there is, it must be acknowledged, after their exhaustive investigation of the facts, no ground for blaming the officers in charge, should they fail in unraveling the mystery surrounding the crime. The murder in the early hours of Friday morning last of the woman now known as Mary Ann Nichols has so many points of similarity with the murder of 2 other women in the same neighborhood, one Martha Turner, as recently as August 7th, and the other less than 12 months previously, that the police admit their belief that the 3 crimes are the work of one individual. All 3 women were of the class called unfortunates. Each of them were so very poor that robbery could have formed no motive for the crime, and each was murdered in such a similar fashion that doubt as to the crime being the work of one and the same villain almost vanishes, particularly when it is remembered that all 3 members were committed within a distance of 300 yards from each other. These facts have led the police to almost abandon the idea of a gang being abroad to wreak vengeance on women of this class for not supplying them with money. You have a brother named John Richard. He joined the army and they call him Toilet Dick. Yes, I did hear about that, Dragon Mom. They call, yeah, I'm gonna go, I'll be back. I'm gonna use the John. Detective Inspectors Aberline of the Criminal Investigation Department and Detective Inspector Helson, G Division, are both of opinion that only one person, and that a man, had a hand in the latest murder. It is understood that the investigation of the George Yard mystery is proceeding hand in hand with that of Bucks Row. It is considered unlikely that the woman could have entered a house, been murdered, and removed to Bucks Row within a period of 1 hour and a quarter. The woman who last saw her alive, and whose name is Nellie Holland, was a fellow lodger with the deceased in Thrall Street, and is positive as to the time being 2:30. Police Constable Neal, who found the body, reports the time as 3:45. Bucks Row is a secluded place, from having tenements on one side only. The constable has been severely questioned as to working of his beat on that night and states that he was last on the spot where he found the body not more than half an hour previously. That is to say that at 3:15, the beat is a very short one and quickly walked over would not occupy more than 12 minutes. He neither heard a cry nor saw anyone. That's crazy. You think you would have heard something. Moreover, there are 3 watchmen on duty at night close to the spot, and neither one heard a cry to cause alarm. It is not true, says Constable Neal, who is a man of nearly 20 years' service, that he was called to the body by 2 men. It's not true? He came upon it as he walked, and flashing his lantern to examine it, he was answered by the lights from 2 other constables at either end of the street. These officers had seen no man leaving the spot to attract attention, and the mystery is most complete. The utmost efforts are being used, a number of plainclothesmen being out making inquiries in the neighborhood, and sergeants in Wright and Godley have interviewed many persons who might, it was thought, assist in giving a clue. I know, right, Joe being dead? Joe being dead. Oh my god. Yeah, I would like to liken it to just 1 Jack, not 3. On Saturday afternoon, Mr. Win. E. Baxter, coroner for the Southeastern Division of Middlesex, opened his inquiry at the Working Lads Institute, Whitechapel Road, respecting the death of Mary Ann Nichols, whose dead body was found on the pavement in Bucks Row, Whitechapel, on Friday morning. Detective Inspectors Aberline and Helston and Sergeants Unright and Godley watched the case on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Department. The jury, having been sworn and having viewed the body of the dead woman, which was lying in a shell in the Whitechapel mortuary. Edward Walker, of 16, Maideswood Road, Camberville, deposed that he was now of no occupation, but had formerly been a smith. He had seen the body in the mortuary, and to the best of his belief, it was that of his daughter, whom he had not seen for 2 years. He recognized the body by its general appearance and by some of the front teeth being missing. Deceased also had a scar on the forehead, which was caused by a fall when she was young. There was a scar on the body of the woman then lying in the mortuary. His daughter's name was Mary Ann Nichols, and she had been married quite 22 years. Her husband's name was William Nichols, a printer's machinist, and he was still alive. They had been living apart for 7 or 8 years. Deceased was about 42 years of age. The last time witness heard of the deceased was about Easter, when she wrote him a letter. He produced the letter, which was in handwriting of the deceased. It spoke of a situation she was in, and which she said as liked very much. He answered that letter, but has not heard since from the deceased. The last time he saw the deceased was in June 1886, when she was respectably dressed. That was at the funeral of his son, who was, oh my God, who was burned to death through the explosion of paraffin lamps. Some 3 or 4 years previous to that, the deceased had lived with witness, but he was unable to say what she had been doing. Deceased was not particularly sober woman, and that was the reason why they could not agree. He did not think she was fast with men, and she was not in the habit of staying out late at night while she was living with him. He had no idea what deceased had been doing since she left him. He did not turn the deceased out of doors. They simply had a few words, and the following morning she left home. The reason deceased parted from her husband was that he went and lived with the woman who nursed his wife during her confinement. Witness knew nothing of his daughter's acquaintances or what she had been doing for a living. Deceased was not 5 foot 5 inches in height. She had 5 children, eldest of whom was 21 years of age, and the youngest 8 or 9. She left her husband when the youngest child was only 1 or 2 years of age. The eldest was now lodging with the witness. He was unable to say if the deceased had recently been living with anyone, but some 3 or 4 years ago he heard she was living with a man named Drew, who was a housesmith by trade and had a shop of his own in York Street, Walworth. Witness believed he was still living there. The husband of the deceased had been summoned for the keep of the children, but the charge was dismissed owing to the fact that she was then living with another man. Well, he was living with another woman. Deceased was in the Lambeth workhouse in April last when she left to go to a situation. Her husband was still living at Coburg Road, Old Kent Road, but witness was not aware if he was acquainted with his wife's death. Witness did not think that the deceased had any enemies, as she was too good for that. Police Constable John Neal deposed that on Friday morning he was passing down Bucks Row, Whitechapel, and going in the direction of Brady Street, and he did not notice anyone about. He had been round the same place some half an hour previous to that and did not see anyone. He was walking along the right-hand side of the street when he noticed a figure lying in the street. It was dark at the time, although a street lamp was shining at the end of the road. He walked across and found the deceased lying outside a gateway, her head towards the east. He noticed that the gateway, which was about 9 feet or 10 feet in height and led to some stables, was closed. Houses ran eastway from the gateway, while the board school was westward of the spot. On the other side of the road was the Essex Wharf. The deceased was lying lengthways, and her left hand touched the gate. With the aid of his lamp, examined the body and saw blood oozing from a wound in the throat. Like she just literally got deceased. The blood was still oozing. Deceased was lying upon her back with her clothes disarranged. Witness felt her arm, which was quite warm from the joints upwards, while her eyes were wide open. Her bonnet was off her head and was lying by her right side, close by the left hand. Witness then heard a constable passing Brady Street, and he called to him. Witness said to him, "Run at once for Dr. Llewellyn, seeing another constable in Baker's Row." Witnesses dispatched him for the ambulance. Dr. Llewellyn arrived in a very short time. In the meantime, witnesses had rung the bell of Essex Wharf and inquired if any disturbance had been heard. He was told no. Sergeant Kirby then came and he knocked. The doctor, having looked at the woman, said, "Move the woman to the mortuary. She is dead. I will make a further examination of her." They then placed the deceased on the ambulance and removed her to the mortuary. Inspector Spratley came to the mortuary, and while taking a description of deceased, lifted up her clothes and discovered she was disemboweled. So this is the first one. Mary Ann Nichols. This is the first one that was ever disemboweled. The other two were they were cut, but this one was disemboweled. So this is the first of that. That's why I always thought that Mary Ann Nichols was the first victim of Jack the Ripper. But then again, he could have started with the other two. So she was disemboweled, and that had not been noticed before. On the deceased was found a piece of comb and a bit of looking glass, but no money was found. In the pocket, an unmarked white pocket handkerchief was found. There was a pool of blood where the neck of the deceased was lying in Buck's Row. He had not heard any disturbance that night. The farthest he had been that night was up at Baker's Row to the Whitechapel Road, and was never far away from the spot. The Whitechapel Road was a busy thoroughfare in the early morning, and he saw a number of women in that road, apparently on their way home. At that time, anyone could have got away. Witness examined the ground while the doctor was being sent for. Inspector Spratley observed that he examined the road after it was daylight. In answer to a juryman, the witness said he did not see any trap in the road. He examined the road, but could not see any marks of wheels. The first persons who arrived on the spot after he discovered the body were two men who worked at a slaughterhouse opposite. They stated that they knew nothing of the affair, nor had they heard any screams. Witnesses had previously seen the men at work. They would be 3:15 or half an hour before he found the body. So I'm wondering if they used ether, because that would be, I mean, that's what would knock people out very quickly. And it was something that they used back then, right? And that would be why nobody heard any screams. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. Grandparents lived there until they died within 3 months of each other. I find that, honestly, with true love, When one dies, the other one follows, always. Then they get to be together again. Dr. Henry Llewellyn, surgeon of 152 Whitechapel Road, stated that at 4 o'clock on Friday morning, he was called by the last witness to Bucks Row. The officer told him that what he was wanted for. On reaching Bucks Row, he found deceased lying flat on her back on the pathway, her legs being extended. Deceased was quite dead, and she had severe injuries to her throat. Her hands and wrists were cold, but the lower extremities were quite warm. Witnesses examined her chest and felt the heart. It was dark at the time. He should say the deceased had not been dead more than half an hour. He was certain that the injuries to the neck were not self-inflicted. There was very little blood around the neck, and there were no marks of any struggle or of blood as though the body had been dragged. Witness gave police directions to take the body to the mortuary where he could make another examination. But an hour afterwards, he was sent for by the inspector to see the other injuries he had discovered on the body. Witness went and saw the abdomen was cut very extensively. That morning, he had made a post-mortem examination of the body. It was that of a female of about 40 or 45 years. 5 of the teeth were missing, and there was a slight laceration of the tongue. There was a bruise running along the lower part of the jaw on the right side of the face. That might have been caused by a blow from a fist or a pressure from a thumb. There was a circular bruise on the left side of the face, which also might have been inflicted by the pressure of fingers. On the left side of the neck, about 1 inch below the jaw, there was an incision about 4 inches in length and ran from a point immediately below the ear. You would be up all night. On the same side, but an inch below and commencing about 1 inch in front of it, was a circular incision, which terminated at a point about 3 inches below the right jaw. The incision completely severed all the tissues down to the vertebrae. The large vessels of the neck on both sides were severed. The incision was about 8 inches in length. The cuts must have been caused by a long-bladed knife, moderately sharp and used with great violence. No blood was found on the breast, either of the body of the clothes. There were no injuries about the body till about the lower part of the abdomen. 2 or 3 inches from the left side was a wound running in a jagged manner. The wound was a very deep one, and the tissues were cut through. There were several incisions running across the abdomen. There were also 3 or 4 similar cuts running downwards on the right side, all of which had been caused by a knife which had been used violently and downwards. The injuries from left to right and might have been done by a left-handed person. All the injuries have been caused by the same instrument. At this stage, Mr. Wynne Baxter adjourned the inquiry until this morning. The next report respecting the adjourned inquest appeared in the Times of September 4th, 1888. Like, they do a lot of inspecting the papers, the doctors, everything on a murdered person. Like, they don't leave any stone unturned. Like, the amount of stuff I'm reading just for this one moment. Well, all of them. Like, it's amazing. And I can't believe they didn't find the murderer. So the Whitechapel murder. Yesterday morning, Mr. Wynne E. Baxter, the coroner for the Southeastern Division of Middlesex, resumed his inquiry at the Working Lads Institute, High Street, Whitechapel, respecting the death of Mary Ann Nichols, whose dead body was found on the pavement in Bucks Row, Whitechapel, on Friday morning. Detective Inspector Aberline, Scotland Yard, Inspector Helston, and Detective Sergeants P. Enright and Godley watched the case on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Department. Inspector J. Spratling, J Division, was the first witness called. He deposed that at 4:30 on Friday morning, he was called on the spot where the body of the deceased was found lying. On getting there, he found 2 constables, one of whom pointed to the exact spot on which he found the body. At that time, the blood was being washed away, but he could see some stains in between the stones. He was told that the body had been removed to the mortuary. On going there, he found the body was still in the ambulance in the yard. While waiting for the arrival of the keeper of the dead house, he took a description of the deceased, but at that time did not notice any wounds on the body. On the body being put in the mortuary, he made a more careful examination and then discovered the injuries to the abdomen, and at once sent for Dr. Llewellyn. He saw 2 workhousemen stripping the body. At this point, in reply to a question, Detective Sergeant P. N. Wright said that he gave instructions that the body should not be touched. Witness, continuing his evidence, stated he again went to the mortuary and made an examination of the clothing taken off the deceased. The principal parts of the clothing consisted of a reddish ulster, somewhat the worse for wear, a new brown linsey dress, two flannel petticoats having the marks of the Lambeth workhouse on them, and a pair of stays. What is a pair of stays? Is that shoes? Underwear? The things were fastened, but witnesses did not remove them themselves, so could not say positively that all the clothing was properly fastened. The coroner observed it was such matters as these that threw a most important bearing on a subject. The question of the clothing was a most important one. Later on, he directed Constable Thane to examine all the premises in the vicinity of the spot where the body was discovered. Inspector Spratling, continuing, said he and Sergeant Godley examined the East London and District Railway embankments and lines and also the Great Eastern Railway Yard, but they were unable to find anything likely to throw any light on the affair. One of Mr. Brown's men wiped up the blood. A constable was on duty at the gate of the Great Eastern Railway Yard, which is about 50 yards from the spot where the body was found. He had questioned the constable, but he had not heard anything. Mrs. Green, who also lived opposite the spot, had been seen, and during the night she had not heard anything, although she was up until 4:30 that morning. Yeah, see, that makes me think, oh, it's a corset. Thank you. That's what makes me think that this person used ether or whatever it's called to make them pass out so they can't scream. All right, so stays is a corset. Thank you. Mr. Purkis, who also lived close by, stated his wife had been pacing the room that morning, about the time the murder must have been committed, but she had not heard anything. It was 150 yards from the spot where the body was found to Barber's slaughter yard. That was by walking round the board school. During the night, Constable Neal and other officer were within hearing distance of the spot. He should think deceased had been murdered while wearing her clothes and did not think she had been dressed after death. Henry Tompkins, a horse slaughterer living at 12 Coventry Street, Bethnal Green, stated he was in the employ of Mr. Barber. Thursday night and Friday morning, he spent the slaughterhouse in Winthrop Street. Witness commenced about his usual time between 8 and 9 o'clock p.m. On Friday morning, he left off work at 20 minutes past 4 and went for a walk. It was their rule to go home when they did so, but they did not do so that morning. A constable told them of the finding of the murdered woman, and they went to look at her. James Mumford, Charles Britton, and Witness worked together. At 12 o'clock, Witness and Britton left the slaughterhouse and returned about 1 o'clock. They did not again leave the slaughterhouse until they heard of the murder. All the gates were open, and the witnesses during the night did not hear any disturbance. The only person who came to the slaughterhouse was the constable. At times women came to the place, but none came that night. Had any called out murder in Buck's Row, he might not have heard it. There were men and women in the Whitechapel Road. Witnesses in Mumford went and saw the deceased, and then Britton followed. At that time, a doctor and 3 or 4 constables were there, and witnesses remained there until the body was taken away. At night, he made his mates generally went out to have a drink. He depended upon what time their work was done when they went home. The constable was at the slaughterhouse at about 4:15 when he called for his cape. It was then that they heard of the murder. That's why I think it has to be ether. It's got to be because I know they did use that back then. Um, so okay. The constable was at the slaughterhouse, blah blah blah, and then when he called for his cape, is that literally a cape or is that like a I don't know what the hell that is. I'm thinking it's a cape, but I don't think I don't know what they would call it. So if you know what that is, let me know. Inspector Heltson Division, J Division, disposed that It was 7:15 on Friday morning when he received information of the murder. Having learnt full particulars, he proceeded to the mortuary where he saw deceased who had her clothing on. He saw the things removed. The bodice of the dress was buttoned down to the middle, and the stays were fastened. There were no bruises on the arms to indicate that a struggle had taken place. The wounds on the abdomen were visible with the stays on, and that proved they could have been inflicted while the stays were on the deceased. He did not examine the spot where the body was found until after the blood had been washed away. Witnesses was of opinion that the murder was committed at the spot where the body was found. The clothes were very little disarranged, thus showing that the body could not have been carried far. Constable G. Mizzen stated that at 4:15 on Friday morning, he was in Hanbury Street, Baker's Row, and a man passing said, "You are wanted in Baker's Row." The man, named Cross, stated a woman had been found there, and going to the spot, he saw Constable Neal, and by the direction of the latter, he went for the ambulance. When Cross spoke to the witness, he was accompanied by another man, and both of them afterwards went down Hanbury Street. Cross simply said he was wanted by a policeman and did not say anything about a murder having been committed. He denied that before he went to Bucks Row, he continued knocking people up. What does that mean? Knocking people up. Um, Kate says, so the constable was at the slaughterhouse at about 4:15 when he called for his cape. Is that like the horses, like horse and buggy? And same with what does knocking people up mean? For us, it means like knocking a girl up. That means getting them pregnant. I've never heard of knocking. Before he went to Bucks Row, he continued knocking people up. I don't know what that means. Or cape. He called for his cape. George Cross, a carman, stated that he left home on Friday morning at 20 minutes past 3, and he arrived at his work at Broad Street at 4 o'clock. Witness walked along Bucks Row and saw something lying in front of the gateway like a tarpaulin. It is like a coat? Okay. A man came along and Witness spoke to him. They went and looked at the body. Witness, having felt one of the deceased woman's hands and finding it cold, said, "I believe she is dead." The other man, having put his hand over her heart, said, "I think she is breathing." He wanted Witness to assist in shifting her, but he would not do so. He did not notice any blood. As it was very dark, they went to Baker's Row, saw the last witness, and told him there was a woman lying down in Bucks Row on the broad of her back. Witnesses also said he believed she was dead or drunk, while the other men stated he believed her to be dead. The constable replied, "All right." The other man left Witnesses at the corner of Hanbury Street and turned into Corbett's Court. He appeared to be a carman and was stranger to Witness. At the time, he did not think the woman had been murdered. Witness did not hear any sounds of a vehicle and believed that had anyone left the body after he got into Bucks Row, he must have heard him. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it, Dragon Mama. I can't stand those shows. William Nichols, a machinist at Coburg Road, which was Mary Nichols' um, ex-husband, Old Kent Road, stated that the deceased woman was his wife. He had been separated from her for upwards of 8 years. The last time he saw her was over 3 years ago, and he had no idea what she had been doing since that time, nor with whom she had lived. The deceased was much given to drink. They separated several times, and each time he took her back, she got drunk, and that was why he had to leave her altogether. I'm going cross-eyed. Jane Oram. Spitalfields, Thrall Street Spitalfields, deposed that deceased had slept at the common lodging house there for about 6 weeks. Witness and deceased had occupied the same bed. For 8 or 10 days, she had not been to the lodging house, but Witness saw her on the morning of her death in the Whitechapel Road. Deceased told her she was living with where men and women were allowed to sleep, but added that she should come back and live with Witness. Witness believed deceased stated she had been living in Flowery Dean Street. Deceased was the worse for drink and refused to stay with Witness, although she did all she could to persuade her to do so. Witness did not think she was a fast woman. She was a clean woman, but witness had previously seen her the worse for drink. Sherlock Holmes wears a cape. Mary Ann Monk stated that she was an inmate of the Lambeth Workhouse. Oh, thank you for becoming a member, Joe. Yay. She knew the deceased who had been an inmate of the Union, but that was 6 or 7 years ago. The coroner here informed the jury that the police did not propose to offer any further evidence that day, and it would be as well to adjourn the inquiry sufficiently long to give them an opportunity of obtaining further evidence. The inquiry was accordingly adjourned for a fortnight. The next extract is from the Times, dated 18th September 1888, page 12, and relates to the resumed inquest into the murder of Mary Ann Nichols. Hey, Jen. And again, yeah, they don't miss anything. The Whitechapel murder. Yesterday, Mr. Wayne E. Baxter, coroner for the Southeastern Division of Middlesex, resumed his adjourned inquiry at the working lads in Stoop Bucks Row, Whitechapel, respecting the death of Mary Ann Nichols, who was found brutally murdered in Bucks Row, Whitechapel, on the morning of Friday, the 31st. So what this all is basically it's all the transcripts. It's all the coroner's reports, the newspapers reports, the inspectors, everything. I mean, literally everything is in this book. That's what I'm reading. Detective Inspectors Aberline, Scotland Yard, and Helson, and Inspectors Spratling and Chandler watched the case on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Department and Commissioners of Police. Mr. Llewellyn, the surgeon, recalled that and said that since the last inquiry, he had been to the mortuary and again examined the deceased. She had an old scar on her forehead. No part of the viscera was missing. He had nothing to add to his previous evidence. Mrs. Emma Green, living at New Cottage, Bucks Row, stated she was a widow and occupied the cottage next to where the deceased was found. Her daughter and 2 sons lived with her. Witnesses went to bed about 11 o'clock on the night of Thursday, August 30th, and one of her sons went to bed at 9 o'clock, and the other one at 9:45. Her daughter went to bed when she did, and they occupied the same room. It was a front room on the first floor. Witnesses did not remember waking up until she heard a knock at the front door about 4 o'clock in the morning. She opened the window and saw 3 or 4 constables and 2 or 3 other men. She saw the body of deceased lying on the ground, but it was still too dark to clearly distinguish what had happened. Witness heard nothing, absolutely nothing unusual during the night, and neither her sons or her daughter awoke. By the jury, she was a light sleeper, and had a scream been given, she would have heard it. Though people often went through Bucks Row, and there was often a great noise in it, she did not believe there was any disorderly house in Bucks Row. She knew of no disorderly house in the intermediate neighborhood. The coroner observed that had no reference to this inquiry. The 8th was the morning of the other murder. It was decided to take the witnesses' evidence. Witnesses continuing. So on Saturday morning, the 8th, he was coming down the Cambridge Heath Road, and when just opposite the Foresters, Arms saw a man on the opposite side of the street. His particular appearance made a witness look at him. He appeared to have a wooden arm, as it was hanging at his side. Witness watched him until he got level with the Foresters' arms. He then put his hand down, and Witness saw about 4 inches of the blade of a long knife sticking out of his trousers pocket. 3 other men were also looking at him, and Witness spoke to them. Witness followed him, and as soon as he saw he was followed, he quickened his pace. Witness lost sight of him under some railway arches. He was about 5 foot 8 inches high, about 35 years of age, with a dark mustache and whiskers. He wore a double peak cap, dark brown jacket, and a pair of overalls over a pair of dark trousers. He walked as though he had a stiff knee, and he had a fearful look about his eyes. By the coroner, witness should say the man was a mechanic. The overalls were perfectly clean. He could not see what kind of knife it was. He was not a muscular man. Inspector Helson said they had been unable to trace that man. Walter Purkis stated he lived at Essex Wharf, Bucks Row, and was a manager there. His house was in Bucks Row and fronted the street. Hey, Crystal. That's another reason people believe Jack the Ripper was a doctor or trained in medicine. They either wouldn't be available to just anyone. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'm thinking he was H.H. Holmes. There's such a like, it's I don't know. It adds up. Hey, Heavenly Cow. Oh, I'm sorry you're sick. Geez, you keep getting a rough go. It was nearly opposite to where the deceased was found. His wife, children, and servant occupied the house with him. Witness and his wife slept in the front portion of the house, the room on the second floor. On the night of the occurrence, he went to bed at 11 o'clock or a quarter past 11. Witness awoke at various times during the night, and he was awake between 1 and 2 o'clock. He did not hear anything until he was called up by the police at 4 o'clock. His wife was awake the greater portion of the night. Neither of them heard a sound during the night, and it was unusually quiet. When the police called him, he opened the landing window. He could see the deceased, and there were 2 or 3 men there, besides 3 or 4 constables. Had there been any quarreling in the row during the night, witness would certainly have heard it. Hey, Tammy, is there not any way you can stay in a hospital? That would be awesome, Great Dane Mom. Patrick Mulshaw, a night porter in the employ of the Whitechapel District Board of Works, living at 3 Rupert Street, Whitechapel, said on the night of the occurrence, he was at the back of the Working Lads Institute in Winthorpe Street. He went on duty about a quarter to 5 in the afternoon and remained until about 5 minutes to 6 the next morning when he was relieved. He was watching some sewage works. He dozed at times during the night, but was not asleep between 3 and 4, and he did not see anyone about during that period and did not hear any cries for assistance or any other noise. The slaughterhouse was about 70 yards away from where he was. Another man then passed by and said, "Watchman, old man, I believe somebody is murdered down the street." Witness then went to Bucks Row and saw the body of deceased lying on the ground. 3 or 4 policemen and 5 of 6 working men were there. Hey, Becca. By the coroner, if anyone had called out for assistance from the spot where the body was, he might have heard it. Nothing suspicious occurred during the time he was watching, and he saw no person running away. There was no one about after 11 and 12 o'clock, and the inhabitants of the street appeared to be very orderly persons. He did not often see the police there. During the night, he saw 2 constables, including Constable Neal. He was unable to say what time he saw that officer. Constable John Fail. Nope. Fane? Nope, fail. Said he was not brought any closer to Bucks Row, his beat, than Brady Street, but he passed the end of it. He passed the end of Bucks Row every 30 minutes. Nothing attracted his attention until about 3:45 a.m., when he was signaled by a brother constable flashing his lamp some way down Bucks Row. Witnesses went to him and found Constable Neal standing by the body of the deceased. Neal was by himself. Witness ran for the door and, having called Dr. Llewellyn, accompanied him to the spot where the deceased was laying. On his return with the doctor, Neal and 2 workmen were standing by the body. He did not know the workmen. The body was then taken to the mortuary by Sergeant Kirby, Constable Neal, and an officer of the H Division. Witness, acting under orders, waited at the spot for Inspector Spratling. He was present when the spots of blood were washed away. On the spot where the deceased had been lying was a mass of congealed blood. He should say it was about 6 inches in diameter and had run towards the gutter. It appeared to him to be a large quantity of blood. It's a weight loss program that you're on? They can't figure out what's wrong with you, and you've lost 30 pounds since What? Oh my God. By the coroner, they say he helped to put the body on the ambulance, and the back appeared to be covered with blood, which he thought had run from the neck as far as the waist. He got blood onto his hands. There was also blood on the ground where the deceased legs had been. Witnesses, after searched Essex Wharf, the Great Eastern Railway, the East London Railway, and the District Railway as far as Thomas Street, but could find no knife, marks of blood, or anything suspicious. He did not make inquiries as the houses in Bucks Row. Yeah, she does need to be in the hospital. Like, what the hell? 30 pounds since Friday? That it's only Sunday. What? Yeah, there's something not right there. You need to get your ass back in there. By the jury. He did not pass the end of Bucks Row exactly at the end of each half hour. It was 3:15 when he was round there before. He did not take his cape to the slaughterhouse, but sent it by a brother constable. When he was sent for the doctor, he did not first go to the horse slaughters and say that a murder has been committed. He had better fetch his cape. He was not supposed to leave his beat. Shortly before he was called by Constable Neal, he saw one or two men going to work in the direction of Whitechapel Road. When he was signaled by Neal, he was coming up Brady Street from the direction of Whitechapel Road. Robert Ball, a carman of 30, Foster Street, Whitechapel, stated he went to work at Cobbett's Court, Spitalfields. It was for the blood, yeah. He left home about 3:45 on the Friday morning, and as he was passing up Bucks Row, he saw a man standing in the middle of the road. As Witness approached him, he walked towards the pavement, and Witness stepped onto the roadway in order to pass him. He then touched Witness on the shoulder and said, "Come and look at this woman here." Witness went with him and saw a woman lying right across the gateway. Her clothes were raised almost up to her stomach. Witness felt her hands and face, and they were cold. He knelt down to see if he could hear her breathe, but could not, and he thought she was dead. It was very dark, and he did not notice any blood. They agreed that the best thing they could do would be to tell the first policeman they met. He could not see whether the clothes were torn, and he did not feel any other part of her body except the hands and face. They looked to see if there was a constable, but one was not to be seen. While he was pulling the clothes down, he touched the breast and then fancied he felt a slight movement. Oh my God, heavenly. Oh, I'm so glad you get to see your dog and you're with your niece. Good. Still, losing that much weight, that is insane. By the corner. The morning was rather a chilly one. Witnesses and the other man walked on together until they met a policeman at the corner of Old Montague Street and told him what they had seen. Up to that time, not more than 4 minutes had elapsed from the time he saw the body. He had not met anyone before he reached Bucks Row and did not see anyone running away. Well, thank you, Crystal. Robert Mann, a pauper inmate of the Whitechapel workhouse, stated he had charge of the mortuary. On the morning in question, the police came to the workhouse and told him there was a body at the mortuary. Witness went there about 5 o'clock and remained there until the body was placed inside the mortuary. He then locked the mortuary door and went to breakfast. After breakfast, Witness and Hatfield, another inmate of the workhouse, undressed the body. No police or anyone else was present when that was done. Inspector Helson was not there. What? That seems a little strange. By the coroner, he had not been told that he must not touch the body. He could not remember Inspector Helson being present as he was confused. He was sure the clothing was not torn or cut, but could not describe where the blood was. To get off the clothes, Hatfield had to cut them down the front. By the jury, the body was undressed this morning and was not taken out after it was brought in. The coroner said the witness was subject to fits, and his statements were hardly reliable. James Hatfield said he assisted the last witness in undressing the deceased. Inspector Helson was not there. They first took off the ulster and put it on the ground. Witness then took the jacket off and put it in the same place. He did not have to cut the dress to get it off, but cut the bands of the two petticoats and then tore them down with his hands. Deceased was wearing a camisole, and he tore it right down the front. She was not wearing any stays. No one gave them any instructions to strip the body. Yeah, that's the thing. What the hell are they doing? All right, you have a great night. They did it as to have the body ready for the doctor. He had heard something about a doctor coming, and he was not aware that anyone was present while they were stripping the deceased. Afterwards, the police came and examined the clothing. They found the words Lambeth Workhouse on the band of one of the petticoats. Witness cut that portion out by direction of Inspector Helson. That was the first time he had seen Inspector Helson that morning. It was about 6:30 when the witness arrived at the mortuary. Although he had said deceased wore no stays, he would not be surprised to find she had stays on. But she did have them on. What? The foreman. Why, you tried the stays on the body of the deceased in my presence at the mortuary, and you said they were short. Witness admitted his memory was bad. In answer to the coroner, Inspector Aberline said they were unable to find the man who passed down Bucks Row while the doctor was examining the body. Kind of sounds like a shit show. A lot of mistakes in this one. Inspector Sparling, J Division, said that he had made inquiries at several of the houses in Bucks Row, but not all of them. The coroner then that will have to be done. Witness further said he had made inquiries at Mrs. Green's, the wharf at Snyder's factory, and also at the Great Eastern Wharf, but no one at those places had heard anything unusual during the morning in question. He had seen the board school keeper, but he had not heard anything. Had the other inhabitants heard a disturbance of any kind, they would, no doubt, have communicated with police. There was a gateman at the Great Eastern Railway, but he was stationed inside the gates and had not heard anything. There was a watchman employed at the Snyder's factory. He distinctly told the mortuary keeper not to touch the body. Inspector Helson said he knew of no other evidence. In answer to the juryman, the officer said the murderer would have no occasion to get on to the Great Eastern Railway as he could pass along the street. The foreman thought that if a substantial reward had been offered by the Home Secretary in the case of the murder in George Yard, those two horrible murders would not have happened. Mr. Matthews thought that rewards got into wrong hands, but if they did, what did it matter, so long as the perpetrator which would be brought to justice? The coroner understood there was a regulation that no reward should be offered in the case of the murder of either a rich or a poor person. The foreman believed a substantial one would have been offered had a rich person been murdered. He would be glad to give $5 himself for the capture of the murderer. The inquiry was then adjourned until Saturday. The report on the adjourned inquest appeared in the Times of Monday, September 24th, 1888, on page 3. The Whitechapel murders. On Saturday, Mr. Wynne E. Baxter, coroner of the Southeastern Division of Middlesex, resumed his adjourned inquiry at the Working Lads Institute, Whitechapel Road, respecting the death of Mary Ann Nichols, who was found brutally murdered in Bucks Row, Whitechapel. William Ede stated he had since seen the man whom he saw with a knife near the Foresters' Hall. He had ascertained that his name was Henry James, and that he did not possess a wooden arm. The coroner said that the man James had seen had been proved to be a well-known harmless lunatic. Isn't that nice? As there was no further evidence forthcoming, he would proceed to sum up. Before commencing the few remarks that he proposed to take to the jury, he was sure, be only reflecting their feelings if he first returned his thanks to the committee of the Working Lads Institute for the use of such convenient room for the purposes of this inquest. Without their assistance, they would have been compelled to conduct this inquiry in a public house parlor, inconvenient and out of harmony with their functions. For Whitechapel not only did not possess any coroner's court, such as have been erected in St. Luke's, Clerkenwell, the city, and most of the West End parishes, but it was without any town hall or vestry hall, such as were used for inquests at St. George's, Shadwell, Limehouse, and Parlor. Holy, that was a long run-on sentence. Oh, she's with her, she's hanging out with family. The jury would probably have been surprised to find there was no public mortuary in Whitechapel. He had been informed that there was formerly one, but that it was demolished by the Metropolitan Board of Works when making a new street, and that compensation was paid to the local authorities, who have never yet expended it on the object of the trust. Perhaps he had been misinformed, but this he did know, that jury after jury had requested the coroner to draw the attention of the sanitary authorities to the deficiency and the hill here too, without success. They deemed it essential for the health of the neighborhood, and surely if mortuaries were found necessary at the West End, there must be stronger reasons for them here, in the midst of so much squalid crowding. But the inconvenience had been felt in other ways in this inquiry. In the absence of a public mortuary, the police carried the body to the dead house belonging to the workhouse infirmary. It was admittedly not ornate in appearance and was not altogether suited for the purpose to which it had been applied, but they must not forget that such mortuary was a private structure, intended solely for the use by the Union authorities, and that its use on other occasions had been allowed only by the courtesy of the guardians. But that only proved the necessity for a public mortuary. These are so big sentences. Had there been a public mortuary, there would have also been a keeper whose experience would have shown the advisability of the body being attended to only the presence of the medical witness. He himself trusted now that the attention of the authorities had again been called to the pressing matter. The subject would be taken into serious consideration and the deficiency supplied. Referring to the facts in the case before him, the coroner said the deceased had been identified by her father and her husband to have been Mary Ann Nichols, a married woman with 5 children at about 42 years of age. She was of intemperate habits and left her husband 8 years ago on account of drink. The husband had not seen or heard of her for 3 years. She had evidently formed irregular connections, but still lived under her father's roof for 3 or 4 years, and then, either to avoid the restraints of a settled home, or in consequence of her own misconduct, she left her father, who had not seen her for more than 2 years. She was in the Lambeth workhouse on several occasions, at Christmas last and again in April. While there last, she was fortunate enough to find a lady in Wandsworth willing to take her into the house as a domestic servant, and at times she wrote her father a letter which held out some promise of reform. But her fresh start did not appear to have lasted long, for soon afterwards left her situation in great disgrace. From that time until her death, it was pretty clear that she had been living an intemperate, irregular, and a vicious life, most likely in the common lodging house in that neighborhood. There was nothing in the evidence as to the movements of the deceased on the day before her death, except a statement by herself that she was living in a common lodging house, called the White House, in Flower Indian Street, Spitalfields, but he believed her movements had been traced by the police and were not considered to have any connection with her death. On Friday evening, the 31st of August, she was seen by Mrs. Holland, who knew her well, at the corner of Osborne Street and Whitechapel Road, nearly opposite the parish church. The deceased woman was then much worse for drink and was staggering against a wall. Wow. Her friend endeavored to persuade her to come home with her, but she declined and was last seen endeavoring to walk eastward down Whitechapel. She said she had her lodging money 3 times that day, but that she had spent it, that she was going about to get some more money to pay her lodgings, and she would soon be back. In less than an hour and a quarter after this, she was found dead at the spot, rather under 3/4 of a mile distant. The deceased was first discovered by a carman on his way to work, who passed down Bucks Row on the opposite side of the road. Immediately after he had ascertained that the dark object in the gateway was the figure of a woman, he heard the approaching footsteps of a man. This proved to be Paul, another Carmen. Together they went to the woman. The condition of her clothing suggested to them that she had been outraged and had fainted. She was only just dead, if life were really extinct. Paul says he felt a slight movement of her breast, and though she was breathing. Neither of the Carmen appeared to have realized the condition of the woman, and no injuries were noticed by them. But that, no doubt, was accounted for by their early hour of morning and the darkness of the spot. The Carmen reported her circumstances to a constable at the corner of Hanbury Street, 300 yards distant, but although he appeared to have started without delay, he found another constable was already there. In fact, Constable Neal must independently have found the body within a few minutes of the finding of it by two Carmen. The condition in which the body was found appeared to prove conclusively that the deceased was killed on the exact spot in which she was found. There was not a trace of blood anywhere except at the spot where her neck was lying. That appeared to him sufficient to justify the assumption that the injuries to the throat were inflicted when the woman was on the ground, while the state of her clothing and absence of any blood about her legs equally proved that the abdominal injuries were inflicted while she was still in the same position. Nor did there appear any grounds for doubt that, if deceased was killed where she was found, she met her death without a cry of any kind. The spot was almost under the windows of Miss Green, a light sleeper. It was opposite the bedroom of Miss Purkis, who was awake at the time. Then there was watchmen at various spots within very short distances. Not a sound was heard by any, nor was there evidence of any struggle. This might have arisen from her intoxication or from being stunned by a blow. Again, the deceased could not have been killed long before she was found. Constable Neal was positive that he was at the spot half an hour before, and that neither the body was there nor was anyone about. Even if Paul was mistaken in the movement of the chest, Neal found her right arm still warm, and Dr. Llewellyn, who saw the body about a quarter of an hour, was afterwards found the body and lower extremities still warm, notwithstanding the loss of blood and abdominal injuries, and that those extremities had been uncovered. It seemed astonishing, at first thought, that the culprit should escape detection, for there must surely have been marks of blood about this person. If, however, blood was principally on his hands, the presence of so many slaughterhouses in the neighborhood would make the frequenters of that spot familiar with blood-stained clothes and hands, and his appearance might in that way have failed to attract attention while he passed from Bucks Row in the twilight into Whitechapel Road and was lost sight of in the morning's market traffic. Well, that would be, that would make sense then because they were right near a slaughterhouse and the men working, coming to and from, well, mainly going home would have bloodstains on them. You wouldn't think anything of it. He himself thought that they could not altogether leave unnoticed that the fact that the death the jury had been investigating was one of four presenting many points of similarity, all of which had occurred within the space of about 5 months, and all within a very short distance of the place where they were sitting. All four victims were women of middle age, all were married and had lived apart from their husbands in consequence of intertemperate habits, and were at the time of their death leading irregular lives and eking out a miserable and precarious existence in common lodging houses. In each case were the abdominal as well as other injuries. In each case, the injuries were inflicted after midnight and in places of public resort where it would appear impossible that almost immediate detection would follow the crime. In each case, an inhuman and dastardly criminals were at large in society. Emma Smith, who received her injuries in Osborne Street on the early morning of Easter Tuesday of 3rd of April, survived in the London hospital for upwards of 24 hours. Now, this was the first victim, and was able to state that she had been followed by some men, robbed and mutilated, and even to describe imperfectly one of them. Martha Tabram was found at 3 a.m. on Tuesday, the 7th of August, on the first floor landing of George Yard buildings with 39 punctured wounds on her body. In addition to these, and the case under the consideration of the jury, there were the case of Annie Chapman, still in the hands of another jury. We haven't got to her yet, though. The instrument used in the two earlier cases were dissimilar. In the fact, it was a blunt instrument, such as a walking stick. In the second, some of the wounds were thought to have been made by a dagger, but in the two recent cases, the instruments suggested by the medical witnesses were not so different. Dr. Llewellyn said the injuries on Nichols could have been produced by a long-bladed instrument, moderately sharp. Dr. Phillips was of opinion that those on Chapman were by a very sharp knife, probably with a thin, narrow blade, at least 6 to 8 inches in length, probably longer. The similarity of the injuries in the two cases were considerable. There were bruises about the face in both cases. The head was nearly severed from the body in both cases, and those injuries again had in each case been performed with anatomy knowledge. Dr. Llewellyn seemed to incline to the opinion that the abdominal injuries were inflicted first and caused instantaneous death, but if so, it would seem difficult to understand the object of such desperate injuries to the throat or how it came about. There was so little bleeding from the severed arteries that the clothing on the upper surface was not stained and the legs were not soiled, and there was very much less bleeding from the abdomen than from the neck. Well, wouldn't that mean that they just weren't murdered there? Surely it might well be that, as in the case of Chapman, the dreadful wounds to the throat were inflicted in the in the abdominal afterwards. That was a matter of some importance when they came to consider that possible motive there could be for all this ferocity. Robbery was out of the question, and there was nothing to suggest jealousy. There could not have been any quarrel, or it would have been heard. The taking of some of the abdominal viscera from the body of Chapman suggested that there may have been the object of her death. Was it not possible that this may also have been the motive in the case they had under consideration? He suggested that to the jury as a possibility that these two women might have been murdered by the same man with the same object, and that in the case of Nichols, the wretch was disturbed before he had accomplished his object, and having failed in the open street, he tried again within a week of his failure in a more secluded place. If this was correct, the audacity and daring was equal to its maniacal phantasm and abhorrent wickedness. But that surmise might or might not be correct. The suggested motive might be the wrong one. But one thing was very clear, that the injuries were of such a nature that they could have been self-inflicted, that no imaginable facts could reduce that to evidence of manslaughter, and that a murder of a most atrocious character had been committed. The jury, having considered in private, returned a verdict of wilful murder against some person or persons unknown. They also thanked the coroner for the remarks made with reference to the mortuary and for the very able way in which he had conducted the case. So that's the third murder now, and it has ended with the willful murder against some person or persons unknown. That's crazy. That's 3 now. So next will be chapter 4, and that will be on Annie Chapman. But I'm gonna stop because my throat's getting a little sore. So I hope you guys are enjoying this book. I'll be back. What is today? Sunday? I'll be back on Thursday to read chapter 4, which would be the murder of Annie Chapman. I'm gonna put some photos in the community on my community section there on the community board. There's one of like the buildings where they were found, actual photos of them. Right? Me too, Jen. I love it. It's just, yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, there's pictures of the George Yard buildings, um, Whitechapel, and then there's Martha Tabram, picture of her actual deceased body. Hey, Melissa. There's sketches of where the bodies were in Bucksboro, Whitechapel. Marianne Nichols, there's a mortuary photograph. There's some drawings, there's some photos. So if you guys would like, I can post them. And then there's a photo of the actual original Jack the Ripper files as stored in New Scotland Yard prior to being sent to the Public Records Office. The acid bath murder. Right, I can do that. All right, well, you guys have a great night. I'm gonna get off here. I will write it down and check it out. Acid bath murder. I just gotta stop yapping my throat hurts. I'll be back on Sunday though, reading more of this story. All right, I'll see you guys then. Bye.